Right, so we recently discussed the AEW career of Jake Hager, aka the most pointless signing in AEW history, and a signing that served absolutely no purpose for AEW, and I'm still puzzled to this day why on earth they even signed him. But Jake Hager isn't the only case of AEW signing a wrestler that really just doesn't fit in with the company whatsoever, and just overall goes down as completely pointless, having done nothing in AEW, and that probably could have been seen from the start. You get guys like Parker Boudreaux, but at least they were in the Trustbusters and we can laugh at that. At least Eva Lise won that Women's Tag Team Cup. But as for other people in AEW that were signed, there are a select few that really just served no purpose whatsoever and didn't bring any sort of entertainment or discussion to their AEW run. So we've got some to talk about today. We're going to go ahead and start getting through them, as the first name is one that you're definitely going to recognize, and that is Matt Cardona. Matt Cardona is a guy who can kind of go down as one of the most underutilized guys perhaps in WWE history. During 2011 to early 2012, that man was the most over wrestler in maybe the entire world. He was the US champion, the fans were loving it, and then they just completely buried him with John Cena and Kane and Eve and Jack Swagger winning the US belt off of him. And he would spend 15 years in the WWE as he was eventually released from the company on April 15th, 2020 as part of the WWE budget cuts. And him being out of the WWE was a huge thing, because this is a guy who, like we said, he's been underutilized. He's a guy that people thought maybe the grass would be greener on the other side if he went to another company like AEW. As Zack Ryder, now under his real name of Matt Cardona, would sign for All Elite Wrestling and begin to appear for them on July 29th, 2020 on an episode of Dynamite, saving Cody Rhodes from Alex Reynolds and John Silver. And sure enough, this was Matt Cardona's starting program upon signing for the company, as it was himself and Cody Rhodes up against the Dark Order jobber tag team of John Silver and Alex Reynolds, and he would make his AEW in-ring debut the very next week on Dynamite, as he of course teamed with Cody to take on the Dark Order and get the win in a match I remember being fairly mid and a bit of an underwhelming way to debut Matt Cardona, who was very hot out of WWE. Just having him and Cody have a 12-minute match with some jobbers that no one cares about. Yeah, not really a great informed decision, that. And reports would come out after he had signed that he was actually on a limited appearance deal with AEW, so he wasn't a full-time signing, and no Matt Cardona is All Elite graphic was ever posted. He would appear in and around Dynamite, but wouldn't have another match until the 5th of September at AEW All Out, as he teamed up with a group of random babyfaces, that being Dustin Rhodes, QT Marshall, and Scorpio Sky, as they would defeat the Dark Order. This being a 4v4 match at All Out, with Brody Lee, the TNT champion at the time, in this match, and the babyfaces picking up the win over them, which I think was the wrong decision, and Matt Cardona's final appearance during this initial run in what can kind of go down as a really purposeless run in AEW. And I think what really happened with Matt Cardona when he went to AEW is people quickly realized that he doesn't really fit in with AEW. No matter what, Matt Cardona, the promotion he would fit in the most is with WWE. Obviously, he's doing very well for himself in GCW and on the indies, and he's done well in TNA as well, but WWE over AEW would absolutely be the best destination for Matt Cardona to be in. And that initial AEW run absolutely proved it, in my opinion, and since then Matt Cardona has done some sporadic things with AEW and also Ring of Honor as well. He answered the Cope Open for Adam Copeland's TNT title on the March 20th, 2024 episode of AEW Collision, and he'd have one more match for AEW at the end of the year against Brian Keith, as it was building to his match against Chris Jericho at Ring of Honor Final Battle for the Ring of Honor World Championship, in a match that was really only put together to spite GCW and was not a good match whatsoever, and a bit of a low point for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Thank God Bandito is doing wonders with that belt right now. But yeah, that's about the story of Matt Cardona in AEW, a short and not so sweet run, one that isn't really remembered by anyone at all, as it only had 2 matches and neither of them were memorable memorable in any way. Next up though for AEW's most pointless signing is none other than a man called EJ Nduka. So EJ Nduka, he first started out his wrestling career in WWE. He received a tryout for them in 2018 following a career in bodybuilding, and he would sign to WWE on August 15, 2019 as he was assigned to NXT and the Performance Center, and he was one of those Performance Center guys who just never really managed to escape the Performance Center or get a proper role on TV for NXT or of course the main roster. Yeah, EJ Nduka was stuck in development hell for his entire WWE career. In fact, he only ever had 2 matches in his WWE run, those being 2 untelevised WWE NXT live events where he lost both matches, and he would be released from the WWE on May 19th, 2021 as he would go to the independent scene, more specifically MLW, where he would debut for them at the Battle Riot. And EJ Nduka had a very decent run in MLW as he would team up with Calvin Tankman to form Hustle and Power, and they would win the MLW World Tag Team Championships, and they were a pretty damn good team. They were enjoyable to watch for sure. And they would have a fairly long 315-day run with the belts before losing them to the Samoan SWAT team, as they lost the belts at the start of 2023, and EJ himself would then exit MLW as he would be signed to AEW and make his AEW debut on an episode of Dark that same month, losing to Takeshita. And then after that, we didn't see him for a very long time. EJ Nduka would start becoming a guy who did dark matches, and I don't mean on AEW Dark, I mean actual dark, untelevised matches that only the crowd would see. And that became his role exclusively for about a year and a half, as his first televised wrestling appearance wouldn't come until an episode of Ring of Honor in July of 2024. As it seemed EJ had found a home there over on the AEW main roster and was squashing guys, and also formed a tag team with Lee Johnson, which would be called Lee J, and I thought actually had a fair bit of potential. However, it of course didn't go anywhere, and EJ Nduka would slowly fade out of the spotlight for Ring of Honor, and in May 2025, it was reported that Nduka was a free agent after his AEW contract was expired, having been off TV for about 4 months. And since then, EJ Nduka has took to social media to throw shade at AEW multiple times. He's tweeted out various rants saying things like, "I was never meant to sit. Benches were made for the unsure. I've heard the call, now it's time to move. If you think this guy was made to ride the bench, you need to call the 1800 number because you suffer from mesothelioma, you pencil neck reject." Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that word. He also put a tweet out firing a shot at AEW after Mariah May left the company, asking why is everyone leaving, and also said that his back hurt in regards to the Lee J tag team, which I thought was a bit of a strange tweet given that Lee Johnson was probably the better worker of the two. Anyway, next up is actually 2 people in one entry in one of my favorite AEW stories to tell, and I've told it many times on this channel. It's the story of the Nightmare Collective, Melanie Cruz and Awesome Kong. We'll start off with Melanie Cruz before we get to Awesome Kong. Melanie Cruz was a wrestler in the independent scene from the late 2000s to the late 2010s. She wrestled for Shimmer, she wrestled for GFW, and of course she signed for AEW. And Melanie Cruz made her AEW debut on the December 4th 2019 episode of AEW Dynamite, as she was a planted fan that was plucked from the audience by Brandy Rhodes and Awesome Kong, as she would have her cut her hair to join the Nightmare Collective. The Nightmare Collective, if you don't know, was the stable that was being ran by Brandy Rhodes, Awesome Kong, and Luther. Awesome Kong is someone I don't need to give any introduction on her prior career before AEW, a former TNA Knockouts champion, one of the best ever, an all-time great women's wrestler, and a short WWE run where she never really got to do anything. Her signing to AEW made a lot of sense when it took place, however, it really went down as a complete nothing burger in the end, as she made her debut at Double or Nothing as a surprise entrant in the women's triple threat, making it a 4-way, and she would start being accompanied by Brandy Rhodes and vice versa, as they would form some sort of little alliance, which after they started cutting people's hair and Dr. Luther turned up, that would be revealed as the Nightmare Collective. And yeah, that was the MO of the Nightmare Collective. They'd beat people up and cut their hair, and they'd interfere in women's division matches, and overall, they just kind of ruined the women's division for the few months that they existed in early AEW. The Nightmare Collective goes down as one of AEW's earliest failures. The storyline got very poor negative feedback from the fans. Melanie Cruz in particular was not a good in-ring worker, and Awesome Kong would get injured and then go off to film Glow, so she was off TV, and AEW just scraps the angle as a whole, and Melanie Cruz was released after being made to shave her head for a group that lasted 3 months. I say this every time I talk about the Nightmare Collective, but unlucky to Melanie Cruz. They really made her shave her head buzz cut just to end the group a month later. And yeah, Awesome Kong was never seen on AEW TV again, and she was released from AEW on June 1st, 2021. Melanie Cruz would make some sporadic appearances like in the Women's Tag Team Tournament and on AEW Dark, and she was also eventually released in 2020, making the Nightmare Collective not only have two of the most pointless signings in AEW history, but also be one of the biggest failed storylines in AEW history as well. And finally, the last man to talk about on this list is one of the most puzzling and weirdest AEW signings of all time. That is Trench. If you don't know who Trench is, I don't blame you. He goes under the real name of Grandin Goatsman, and he's a former professional baseball player as he played in the minor leagues. And he would have a short stint in wrestling, which would see him turn up in AEW despite never having a match in wrestling before. He was trained by Jay Lethal and would make his debut for AEW on the December 22nd episode of AEW in 2022, as he was alongside Parker Boudreaux and Rick Ross, as they would form the Mogul affiliate stable under the leadership of Swerve Strickland. Nobody knew who he was when he came out and this faction was formed. His name was never said, but he was later identified as Trench, and I think after this moment we saw him on TV maybe once or twice more, and then we just never saw them again. The Mogul affiliate stable would fade out into obscurity, and then they would combine with the Embassy, thus just getting rid of the faction for good only after a couple of months. Basically what happened is it came out that Trench had actually been injured. Both him and Parker Boudreaux were injured with an undetermined amount of time to recover, and then a month after this report came out, it came out also that his contract had expired, so I guess they signed him on a 6-month contract or something. And yeah, Trench was gone from AEW, having never had a singular match in AEW or wrestling as a whole. Yeah, I don't know what the purpose of signing Trench was. Maybe he was friends with Swerve in real life or something, and that's why they wanted him for the stable. But if he wasn't going to wrestle, then what was the point? And if he hadn't wrestled before ever, then putting him on a major stable on a major TV show is a bit of a risk, and maybe a bit of an ill-informed decision from AEW, and Trench goes down as a totally pointless signing, somehow even more pointless than his partner and counterpart Parker Boudreaux, as he only lasted 7 months in AEW and never wrestled. But yeah, those are just some of the names that I could think of for some of the most pointless AEW signings of all time. If you have any others, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know your thoughts on Matt Cardona, EJ Nduka, Melanie Cruz, Awesome Kong, and Trench, and their AEW runs down below in the comments as well. Like and subscribe, notifications on so you never miss a video on the Top 10 Wrestling channel. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.